I was asked by the Australian Government through the National Critical Care and Trauma Response Centre to deploy to do a needs assessment in Nepal, and it was really about whether we needed to deploy further Australian medical assistance teams into Nepal, and if so, what type of teams should be deployed. So myself and a anaesthetist from Northern Territory, Dr. Brian Spain, were deployed primarily in Kathmandu. We're based in Kathmandu, but we got out of the valley up into Dulakul and a couple of other places nearby. Kathmandu itself wasn't too badly affected. You'll drive around the streets and you'll see houses that have collapsed. There's obviously a number of the well-known historical sites that had been badly damaged. A lot of the walls were badly damaged. But certainly once you got out of the city up into Sindulpulchok and up into Gorkha and other areas, there was a lot of the other districts were badly affected. So by the time we got in, which was about 4 days or 4 and 5 days after, there was already 65 medical teams already deployed, including some quite large teams, including the Israeli military team, which had operating theatres and ICU beds. The biggest challenges have evolved a bit over the week, as you imagine. The first challenges was getting medical care out, and that was done fairly quickly, I suppose, over the first week to get people in. A lot of orthopaedic injuries, neurosurgical injuries, general surgical requirements, and that was done. There was some delay getting into the more remote parts of Nepal, but that occurred over that sort of week to 10 days. There were problems getting food and water up into some of the more remote areas, and certainly there was a lot of work doing that, getting those sort of supplies up. There was a need to replace some of the regional hospitals. 4 of the big regional hospitals had been badly damaged, so there was a need to create a service there and to provide support to those regions, so in places like Badur and other places, and then there's an ongoing issue around shelter, and how many people had lost their houses and their homes, and there was shelter. The final area was around step down care or extended care and rehabilitation. So we got heavily involved in that. The problem is, if you go into the hospitals, and we went into a number of the hospitals, there were ward after ward of patients who had major orthopaedic injuries, lots of quite open wounds, lots of people who'd had external fixators and things inserted. Many of them, a number of whom, could now be discharged with appropriate care back home, but they had no home to go to, they had nowhere to go, and the hospitals were full. They were keen to start, they basically put everything else aside, and they were keen to actually get other surgery going. So we were working with WHO, with the International Organisation for Migration, and with Handicap International to get a extended care and rehabilitation set up going, and we managed, and we established the plans to actually do that, including spinal injuries up at the Spinal Injury Rehab Centre, and looking at establishing 4 centres where they would get care for their wounds and things like that, but they'd also get some rehabilitation. The WA government obviously released me to go, so that was part of their commitment. But the WA government has also made has given a donation of $100,000 to International Red Cross, and certainly that will be most welcome. Certainly from my experience there, the International Red Cross was doing a great job, and they were doing some of the really more difficult roles. So they were looking after 2 of the regional hospitals that had been destroyed. So the Norwegian Red Cross and the Canadian Red Cross had moved in, and they were going to be there for 3 to 6 months. So really providing those services to those areas for a prolonged period of time. So that money, I'm sure, will be most welcome.